Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross, in the studio here in Cowcaddens. With me this evening is our man who sits on the left in almost every respect, Chris McCusker. Welcome back, Chris.
Evening, Gordon. How are we?
I understand you're just back from coronavirus hit Tenerife.
Well, the Canary Islands specifically, I was in Lanzarote,
Right,
but
well,
the whole area was on a state of alert, shall we say.
They must have heard you were coming.
Yes, that's
okay,
right.
well, listen, we will involve you in the first item just as soon as we get to it. And of course, it is about the coronavirus. And a patient from Tayside has been diagnosed with coronavirus and is being treated in isolation at an NHS Tayside hospital. This diagnosis, the first in Scotland, takes the total in the UK to 36. In fact, it's now actually up to 40. There were another 4 since the script was written. The patient is a resident of the Tayside area and has recently travelled from Italy. Clinicians have already begun contact tracing, the process of gathering details of the places that they have visited and the people that they have been in contact with since returning to the UK. It's important to note that this does not involve people the patient may have passed on the street or in a shop, as the risk in these situations is very low. Close contact involves either face-to-face contact or spending more than 15 minutes within 2 metres of an infected person. So I'm in danger here, Chris, at the moment. Caroline Calderwood, Scotland's Chief Medical Officer, said that under the worst-case scenario, between 50% and 80% of Scotland's population would catch the virus over a number of months, with 20% of those likely to become ill. This could equate to as many as 250,000 people in total becoming ill. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, said these are big numbers, but I think it's really important to put them into context and to say to the public that they shouldn't be a cause for panic or undue concern. Firstly, these are modelled assumptions. They're based on the data coming from other countries, China in particular. They're reasonable worst-case scenarios, but they aren't necessarily what will come to pass. And I think it should be reassuring to the public to know that the governments are planning on the basis of what might be a worst-case scenario. The First Minister added that existing NHS capacity was expected to cope, since even the worst case, not all cases would emerge at once. All travellers who develop relevant symptoms, however mild, within 14 days of returning from mainland China, South Korea, Hong Kong, Japan, Macau, Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan and Thailand should self-isolate at home immediately and call their GP or, if they can, NHS 24 111 if their surgery is closed. If you have been to northern Italy, anywhere north of Pisa, Florence and Rimini, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar or Vietnam since the 19th of February and have a cough, a high temperature or shortness of breath, even if your symptoms are mild, you should self-isolate at home immediately and call your GP or NHS 24 if your surgery is closed. If you have been to Hubei province in China or Iran, lockdown areas in northern Italy or special care zones in South Korea since the 19th of February, even if you have no symptoms, remain at home for 14 days, avoid having visitors and don't go to work, school, public places or use taxis or public transport. Phone the free helpline on 0800 028 2816 if you start to develop any symptoms. So, Chris, have you started to develop any symptoms since you came back from your holidays?
I do have a recurring cough, but that's only that's a smoker's cough.
That's a self-inflicted cough.
But the perception, I can tell you, in the Canary Islands is obviously one of caution. That the main affected area, as you said, was Tenerife.
Yeah.
And last weekend when I was there, they were also battling what is called the Clonea, which was the incoming sandstorm from the Sahara Desert.
weather coming from the deserts of North Africa, is it?
Yeah. So that was coming over and forming the sort of, it's not quite a red dust, it's more like a pinkish dust.
Yeah.
But we landed actually in near zero visibility. And some of the other airports within the Canarian Islands, they were actually on lockdown.
What, because of the sandstorm or because of the
because of the
virus?
sandstorm, and also because this case in Tenerife had already been identified with the Italian doctor and his family,
Yeah.
who had already travelled there from Italy. Obviously,
So
that,
is this
gentleman
the
was
same
on
hotel that
vacation.
we've been watching on other television
Yeah.
reports recently?
Yeah. It's part of the TBH chain, which is one of the biggest chains in mainland Spain and the Balearic Islands.
Now,
The hotel was in complete lockdown for everyone.
so nobody in or out? basically?
Nobody in or out whatsoever. There was actually a full exclusion zone around that actual hotel.
I heard today, Chris, that that both Ryanair and I think British Airways have been cancelling quite a lot of flights recently. It seems that people are beginning to start cancelling their holidays.
People are.
I think it was over 100 flights today cancelled in total.
People are being selective as to where they are travelling because of this.
Right.
And you may see an upsurge in
People going to other places,
People
maybe,
going
yeah.
to say maybe Reykjavik or
Florida or something.
Florida or
somewhere.
something. Yeah. Maybe even Canada as well. So, people want to avoid it. There is actually I heard as well that there is now a lack of hand sanitizers in shops and stuff like
I
that
wish I'd
within
bought shares at Lysol.
UK. It seems that people are picking these items up at an alarming rate.
And of course, there have been shortages of face masks.
Along with the face masks as well, yeah, but I also heard the report saying that the face masks don't actually do you any good if you don't have the virus.
So, why bother? You mean they're more used to people who've got the virus to stop them coughing on
to
each
stop
other?
them from coughing onto someone. Whereas if you don't have the virus, it won't stop the virus from going
Getting
in.
in behind the mask. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I understand now, I think, yeah.
Because most viruses are orally transformed.
Droplets of moisture from your mouth.
to mouth and all the rest of it, as well as handshakes.
Also, people sneezing into their hands and then shaking hands with it. Yeah.
So, I think, I would urge people not to be running. By all means, use hand wash.
But I think
and be extra careful when you're, performing tasks such as touching shopping trolleys or
the kind of things you come into contact with, like touch screens and
stair
things like bank
banisters
machines and things like that.
Yeah, by all means. You should be doing that anyway, as a matter of fact. But as I say, wearing a mask just because there's a virus going around is not really, a great prevention.
It's I've been receiving actually information from various medical sources in Europe recently about this virus from a couple of people I know who are experts in virology and also dealing with particularly pulmonary or breathing diseases. And they were telling me that, that it is actually quite hard to tell who will develop the lung problems, the actual pneumonias, but it's nearly always somebody much older or somebody who has already got a breathing difficulty, COPD. But they also now know that although this disease apparently is not as serious as they first thought, there's been various estimates for the mortality rate, but the current one is about 3.5% of all cases turn out to be fatal. So that's quite a low mortality rate.
It's a very low mortality rate, especially when we think about the fact that the other mortality rates are still not going away. Such as heart disease, suicide.
Well, that's it. Yeah, we have a lot of other causes.
And there's quite an awful lot of people who die throughout the world by influenza-related issues. Which is not related to the coronavirus and stuff like that.
Listen, we're going to move on, Chris.
Can I just offer one assurance?
Very quickly.
One assurance from one of my friends who still works in the aviation industry out in the Canaries. All the aircraft that are going into the Canaries are actually getting an extra cleaning.
Good.
On the inside. They're all being cleaned down on the inside and stuff like that. So your aircraft should be spotless. Immaculate, when you get back on it.
Well,
and stuff
I'm
like
sure
that.
will be reassuring the people flying home. Okay, our next story this evening is to do with a US trade deal, and this is the claim recently that the British economy would grow by just 0.16% at best under a US trade deal. The British economy would be at most 0.16% larger by the middle of the next decade under a comprehensive trade deal with the US, the government has admitted, laying bare the limited benefits from striking an agreement with Donald Trump. In a document published by Liz Truss's Department for International Trade, designed to kickstart post-Brexit trade talks with the Trump White House, the government said that the British economy stood to benefit from an ambitious and comprehensive trade deal worth a fraction of GDP, equivalent to £3.4 billion after 15 years, prompting warnings from economists that the benefits would be far outstripped by the losses from crashing out of the EU. The official analysis also showed that a more limited trade deal with the US would deliver benefits to the UK economy worth just 0.07% by the middle of the 2030s, or about £1.4 billion. The government had previously estimated that the economy would be as much as 7.6% smaller should Britain leave the EU without a deal, and about 4.9% smaller under Boris Johnson's preferred Canada-style agreement. Dr. Peter Holmes, an academic at the UK Trade Policy Observatory at Sussex University, said that the numbers are very small. It just goes to show how tiny the gains are from a free trade agreement with the US, compared to our losing our present arrangements with the EU. So, Chris, this is, I guess, a compare and contrast exercise between what staying with the EU or striking a good trade deal with the EU would be worth compared to a comprehensive free trade agreement with the United States.
And it's marginally worse.
So, despite the sort of hype, the pre-Brexit hype that new trade deals would be easy and we would have this fantastic new deal with America, it's proving to be elusive. I mean, the benefit of this is tiny.
Well, anybody with a sceptical mind during the Brexit shenanigans knew that we wouldn't get a better deal than what we currently enjoyed with the EU. And that was, whether you take it under a Canadian-style deal or the FTA deal or no deal in itself. Throughout the years we have grown into everything that the EU has done, and we've formulated that negotiation and arranged, certain payoffs and benefits to us.
Yeah.
So why would we then, be better to start from point zero than currently where we are at this moment in time? Well, before January that was. So, we are going to start all over again. And there is no guarantee that America will agree to any of our proposals whatsoever, and we will have to show our hand first, because America is in a far stronger position than the United Kingdom.
And of course the UK is in a uniquely weak position from a negotiating standpoint of being desperate for a deal with anybody, including with the EU and America. And as I understand it today, it's been reported, I think, by Sky News, I think it was actually reported today, that the UK government is planning to conduct the trade talks with both America and the EU at the same time, which sounds absolutely incredible. I mean, why on earth would they want to do that? I mean, maybe it saves time. They've only got 10 months, perhaps that is the reason.
I really don't know. I mean, I caught the debate that Liz Truss brought in when she presented her statement to the House earlier on today at 5:15, and she was talking up, for me, I thought, one pile of mince, if you pardon the expression. When she was talking about selling dairy produce to America.
I heard Trump saying that it was going to be, Britain was going to be exchanging Scottish smoked salmon for Stetson hats.
Stetson hats.
I mean, that was the most glib thing I've ever heard.
This is how this clown views things. And those are not the most welcoming of statements to come out with as you're starting a trade negotiation. And quite frankly, I think that, you know, with regard to the dairy produce, I think she was talking to the member for St Ives, I can't remember his name, but he was basically saying, we want to start an export of clotted cream to America. Who in their right mind in America wants German clotted cream on their fucking scones? Do you know what I mean?
You would expect something like clotted cream would probably be better made in America rather than exported from here. It's got to go
You would
off,
think
isn't it?
so. You would think so. And again, that goes back to the chat that we previously had about supply chains and all the rest
Our
of it.
next item, Chris, is directly related to what we're just talking about. And this is a headline basically which says that there's a reckless approach towards the US trade talks. The United Kingdom government's approach to a trade deal with the United States poses a significant risk to Scotland's economy, the Minister for Trade, Ivan McKee, has warned. The Scottish Government estimates that the loss of friction-free trade with the EU would lower the gross domestic product by 6.1% by 2030. And by contrast, analysis by the UK government shows that a free trade agreement with the US would only increase UK gross domestic product by up to 0.16%, meaning that the deal fails to make up for the loss from the single EU market. Despite repeated calls for Scottish interests and standards to be protected, by prioritising EU trade talks over an agreement with the US, the UK government has published its negotiating objectives for an agreement without any meaningful engagement with the Scottish Government. Last month, Mr McKee wrote to the Minister of State, the Right Honourable Conor Burns, warning that trading benefits and standards of the EU cannot be replicated through any other deal, and is yet to have his concerns fully addressed. Mr McKee said, we have repeatedly called for a proper and meaningful role in any trade agreements for the punitive US tariffs on Scottish products, whisky, food products and textiles to be removed. But the UK government continues to recklessly pursue a US trade deal without effectively engaging with the Scottish Government. This deal will fail by a large margin to compensate for the loss of full access to the single European market, and prioritising a deal with the United States over the European Union poses significant risk to Scotland's economy and jobs. So it's very clear from this, Chris, that the Scottish Government sees the rush to do a deal by the British government with the United States as very much acting against the interests of Scotland's exporters.
Well, it's not even just Scotland as well, because it also applies to Wales, and one of the Northern Irish MPs made the point that he feels that his constituencies, him and his colleagues, are going to be frozen out, because remember, they're, you know, sort of like 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Do you know?
They are partly in the EU and partly out of it
correct,
at the moment.
Correct,
they're in alignment, as they say.
Yeah. But he's not fully convinced that it's going to benefit, you know, that devolved area. Again, the Welsh are not fully sold on the fact that the Americans will, you know, fall over their feet in order to get Welsh lamb.
There was a report in the press today, in European press, saying that the European Union is worried and has warned the UK against backsliding on the deal that it's made with Northern Ireland for it to remain in alignment.
Yeah.
They seem to be worried that Boris Johnson looks as if he's just going to ignore that and not worry about any kind of border checks at all.
To be honest with me, it wouldn't honestly surprise me. It really wouldn't. But the salient point must be made here with regards whisky and the Scottish produce as well, is the fact that that's all tied up with this never-ending argument over the Boeing issue, which is never going to go away, because
the Boeing issue being
the Boeing issue being that Trump has imposed tariffs on certain Scottish produce because of the UK's stance on the parts of aircraft, stuff like that, made by Boeing, which are I think it was in favour of Bombardier.
Yeah,
Which was in
I remember
Northern Ireland.
that America, well, Donald Trump put a very huge, I think it was a 400% tariff on Bombardier's products, which were being supplied to the American market.
And it's basically because that you know, people were favouring Bombardier over Boeing, and he wasn't being able to get any of his stuff out. You know, and what he's done is he's selectively chosen certain targets, you know, in order to impose tariffs on.
Okay. Well, listen, we're going to move on, Chris, to our next story, which, again, is another, I suppose, a result of what is going on with Brexit at the moment. And this is the SNP who are calling on the Scottish Tories to condemn anti-fishing policy ideas. The SNP has today called on the Scottish Tory leader Jackson Carlaw to publicly dissociate himself and the party from the remarks of a senior Treasury advisor, who said that Scottish agriculture and fishery certainly isn't important. Dr. Tim Leunig, an advisor to Chancellor Rishi Sunak, has been condemned for the remarks, which he said, in which he also said the food sector isn't critically important. And commenting, the SNP MSP Stuart Stevenson said the Scottish Tories must publicly condemn these comments, which are a huge embarrassment for Jackson Carlaw and his MSPs. The remarks from the heart of the UK government expose how little the Tories actually care about Scotland's fishing industry. They sold out our fishing fleet on the way into Europe, and they said it was expendable, and now they're gearing up to sell it out again on the way out of the EU. The SNP will always stand up for Scotland's fishing industry, but it's becoming clearer by the day that the Tories are lining up a sellout, which will be the biggest betrayal in Scottish political history. Either they will fold in trade talks and break their promise to the Scottish skippers by allowing free access to Scottish waters for other EU fleets, or they will allow huge tariffs and red tape to be slapped on our seafood products, which would devastate the sector. So some strong words here from the SNP about these comments. Now, I understand, as a little bit of background, that these comments were made in an email exchange between this advisor and presumably the minister.
Yeah.
But what you have to ask is, what was the question that these were the answer to, where he said that they're not important to it? What is it they're not important to, do you think?
Right, well, the question that I can possibly think was posed was, who gives an F about Scotland?
Do you think it's maybe, I mean, it was speculated upon, but these remarks about, you know, fishing and farming not being important, and certainly not important to enough, were actually in reaction to a question of which industries do we not care about? Which ones are most expendable? Can we live without?
Yeah, but they can prioritise as much as they like, right? And they will, no doubt.
Well, it seems that they will
cherry pick what they
want to help and what they want to let drop.
And that's what the Scottish skippers need to understand, is that quite rightly, as was pointed out in the piece, we were sold out back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And it looks like that we're going to get sold out again. Now, I've often said in life, regardless of the CFP and all the rest of it, but in life, if you're in something, you can change it from within.
Yep.
If you're out something, you have got no say whatsoever. Now, if the Tories basically package up the Scottish fishing industry and use that as a bargaining chip to get what they want, when it becomes our time to be independent, how are we going to claim all that back?
Well, it makes you wonder, Chris, if this might not be the right time for Nicola Sturgeon to call her referendum, because if it becomes apparent to the EU negotiators that there is about to be a decision made on Scotland's staying or leaving with the UK, then those bargaining rights would no longer hold any sway with the Europeans, because they would realise that the UK negotiators couldn't include them with any sense of certainty.
Well, I caught the interview on Mar with the French ambassador, and she was basically alluding to the whole sum of the UK.
So looking at it in the whole, in the round.
In the whole and in the round. And that means looking at the 4 different competencies that make up the UK. And they have to be in unison with each and every
So
one.
in other words, nothing must be out of step or out of place during the negotiations.
Yeah. Now, again, she was using language to make sure that she wasn't being what's the word? She wasn't being inflammatory or anything like that.
No, she was being diplomatic.
Yeah. But what she was saying is that the EU and the UK are potentially going to rip each other up or rip each other apart in the EU negotiations. You know, but she was clearly pointing out that that's what happens in negotiations.
Yeah, there's a lot of give and take.
You can't just go into a negotiation thinking you're going to get everything and walk away out.
No, everybody will have a starting position and then they go to barter.
Yeah.
Okay. What else can we say about this, Chris? Because
the other thing that I always want to point out, which relates to the earlier point as well, Joanna Cherry made a wonderful intervention in this thing with Liz Truss about parliamentary scrutiny of the actual trade deal. Because people may not be aware that MPs are not allowed to vote on a trade deal.
Are they not?
No. So basically trade deals are done by the government, and they are brought to Parliament and say, this is what we've negotiated. It's not for bargaining thereafter.
So they don't have the authority to veto a trade deal.
Correct.
In other words, they have to just, they say this is it, it's done, it's a fait accompli.
So what actually happens is that there's various parliamentary committees that
they scrutinise and maybe add
scrutinise to it. And they maybe add to it and take away from it and stuff like that
but they can't
in the actual run-up. But once it's signed,
that's it.
That's it. So there is no consultation. So there is no vote on it.
Toothpaste is out of the tube then,
correct.
Is it? You can't put it back in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you know that is a point that has to be made, that with very little parliamentary scrutiny on, basically Liz Truss has got carte blanche to do what she wants. And they were also making great play about the fact that they had consulted 150,000 people from the demographic of the UK. You know what I mean? Did you get a phone call?
Not yet.
I certainly didn't. I don't know anybody else that has.
There's an element here, Chris, which came up today, and this is actually... There's a little piece in our script here which says that either they will fold in trade talks and break their promise to Scottish skippers. Now, this caught my attention for one reason, and that is that in the EU at the moment, and you can read this in the European press, the European negotiators believe that Boris Johnson's negotiating team will at some point in June walk out of the talks.
Yeah.
And they are wargaming for this to happen. They believe the British government is going to do this on purpose, and then they are going to try to force the EU into making concessions just before the end of the 10-month period, at the end of December. The EU has said that this is not going to change their position if they do that.
No.
So obviously they are considering all the possible shenanigans and tricks that the UK might want to play.
Let's rewind exactly 1 year when Boris Johnson was saying that no deal was
better than a bad deal.
Sorry, it was what's her name?
Theresa.
Yeah, she's
Theresa
so
May.
insignificant. I've actually forgotten her name now. Theresa May was basically saying that no deal was better than a bad deal, and Boris has always favoured a no deal.
It's widely thought that he has, yes, allegedly.
So he would be quite happy to, if I could possibly have the poetic license to use the phrase of the 100 trade negotiators that have went over to the EU are basically there just to yank their chains until June. And then just pull the plug
and
walk
away and blame the EU.
Walk away, blame the EU and say a big boy did it and ran away.
The question is, though, if he does that, what is going to happen to the UK economy? Because we're then left with just the American trade deal, and we've seen from
Yeah, but
projections.
we're simultaneously brokering this wonderful new trade deal with Donald Trump. So, you know, all is not lost.
Which is going to
Do you
cause
know
the
what I mean?
economy to go backwards.
Yeah,
for the
because,
next 10 years.
you know, we will be able to eat off of hormonal beef and...
We'll wear Stetson hats as well. I think.
Wear Stetson hats while we're eating our chlorinated chicken.
Sounds
And their
terrific.
GM cereals as well.
Excellent, and their what is it? Their hormone-fed beef.
The hormone-fed beef, yeah.
So what a future lies ahead of us, Chris. Okay, let's leave this subject now and move on to our next story, which is the Department of Work and Pensions. And it is that vulnerable disabled people are being pressured to accept unrecorded telephone deals, paying thousands of pounds less benefits than they may legally be entitled to, charities and lawyers have said. The Department for Work and Pensions has been accused of making decide right now offers to people who have appealed against the decision to deny them benefits. In some cases, people say they were told the offer would be withdrawn if they did not accept it within minutes. It's claimed that by making the lower offers over the phone, the DWP is trying to settle cases that could lead to payments of significantly more each year if they were to go to a tribunal. Around 70% of such appeals go in favour of the people who bring them. Several charities and law firms say that they were aware of more than 100 phone deal cases between them. They accused the Department of Work and Pensions of targeting those deemed to have a strong chance of success at a tribunal over personal independence payments, or PIP, and employment support allowance, or ESA. Claimants may be susceptible to accepting a lower offer because of the long tribunal waits and have no income in the meantime. The Law for Life charity reported that it had heard from 57 claimants and 58 welfare rights advisors of cases where disabled people were telephoned and offered awards below what they could expect at appeal. The Law Centres Network, the Public Law Project, the Royal National Institute of Blind People, and Scope have also reported having clients who received the same calls. In many of the reported cases, there was no official record of the offers. What are the DWP up to here, Chris?
Well, you know, I mean,
Usual foul deeds.
What have the DWP been up to? For the last 10 years. They desperately don't want to pay money to people who
deserve it.
Not only deserve it, but to people who desperately need it.
But making them wait for a tribunal and then phoning them up and saying, well, we'll give you a little bit less if you decide now seems so callous and calculated.
It's really, really high-handed tactics. Again,
devious
we have to remember what was said by Sajid Javid, and I don't think that this is by any chalk of the imagination to do with him, but he said that various government departments have to make savings.
And making savings
And
by
making
taking
savings
money
by
out
taking
of
money out of disabled people's hands is, has to be lower than a snake's belly. It's horrendous to think that people are actually being blackmailed over the phone.
Part of the background information that we have here says that some claimants have significant cognitive disabilities and have received unannounced phone calls in which they are given an offer and told they will be called back in an hour or less and asked for a decision. Now, if you have a cognitive impairment and you get a telephone call like that, you're going to be scared. You don't want to lose that offer.
I know.
And you're desperate for the money because you know it's going to be months waiting for a tribunal.
I know firsthand. I'm a carer for my elder brother. He's got mental health illness. He's got schizophrenia, high anxiety, and psychosis. And anytime he gets any marketing phone calls in the house, he just tells them to call back later and puts the phone down and automatically phones me and tells me who is calling them. So, I can ascertain whether it's a scam, somebody trying to sell him double glazing or something like that, or somebody to offer to upgrade his phone, or,
wanting his bank details.
or wanting to take his bank details, whatever. And there was a case 2 years ago where James was actually sanctioned, and we had to take it to appeal, and through the Money Advice Centre in Barrhead, we had fantastic representation at that appeal. Because what the Department of Work and Pensions had done is they had come up to James's door and just chapped it and said, "Oh, I'm here just to do a quick assessment." And 9 times out of 10, people are just going to, they're not going to shut the door and say, "Go away." They're going to go, "All right, okay."
The other thing is, if you are waiting for a benefit, you want it to move quickly, don't you? And they're taking advantage of this.
Yeah, because the other thing as well is that when you go into the benefits, there is this 5 to 6 week wait.
This is the thing that was brought in with the universal credit.
Correct, yeah.
Where they make people wait over a month.
So, I mean, as you are saying, people are at a susceptible point.
But if you're disabled and you have no money,
desperate, they will take anything.
But if you're a disabled person and you have no money, you can't buy any food. And who's going to help you? I mean, how are you going to get to a food bank? These strike me as the most callous acts of any government that I've heard of to date.
But that's what I'm saying. Now, 9 times out of 10, people with cognitive disabilities, they do have a point of contact.
Well,
in the first instance, they should reach out and even speak to their neighbour, so that their neighbour could possibly highlight to someone that this is completely wrong. But what I'm trying to say to you, Gordon, is the fact that tactics like these often lead people who are not in full control of their faculties to make a decision. They're basically holding them at ransom.
Yeah, this is the sort of tactics they used to sell double glazing years ago.
Correct, yes,
Very similar technique.
Yeah.
Our next item, Chris, actually is partly related to this, and it's a better news story because in our next item, the Scottish Government is going to be using some of its limited powers to help people. Now, in this case, it is 16-year-olds. The Scottish Government is using its new benefits powers to remove the need for children to take part in the Department of Work and Pensions Personal Independence Payment Assessments. Under the current DWP rules, children getting disability living allowance for children are asked to apply for PIP 6 months out from their 16th birthday. But under the Scottish Government's changes, young people will continue to get DLA child as long as they remain eligible up to the age of 18. Now, this means that they will not need to do a DWP PIP application or an assessment, which many people say are stressful. This change comes as the Scottish Government takes full responsibility for disability benefits from April this year. The Social Security Secretary, Shirley-Ann Somerville, has said, "We know from people like June Jameson, a parent who has had direct experience of the current system, that making the transition from child to adult services can be a challenging time for their child and family." Adding to this, young people may be going through changes in a number of other areas of their lives at the same time. We've also been told that the fact that this transition is to PIP creates even more stress and anxiety. And this is why we're using our new Social Security powers to extend the eligibility, to ease the pressure on families, and to make sure young people in Scotland have adequate time to move from children to adult Social Security support. Our priority for people already getting this support from the DWP is to move them over in a safe and secure way and make sure that people get the financial support they expect when and where they expect it. So this is a good news story, isn't it, Chris?
It's a welcome story, and one, again, that's close to my heart, as well as my older brother. My daughter is disabled, and she had to, Caitlin is now 19, so she's a year too late to benefit from this. But my ex-wife told me the amount of hassle that she's had to deal with in transforming from one benefit to another. If this was introduced last year, it could have cut out an awful lot of stress.
Young people, generally speaking, from the age of 14, 15, 16, are suddenly faced with a lot of life-changing decisions to
Yeah.
make.
Yeah.
You know, including, you know, if they're going to university or college or
Yeah.
joining a new employment project or something like this. And to have this added burden of having to go through assessments just to get a benefit which they used to get anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
And the government is now, the Scottish government is now taking that stress away.
Yeah, but it's not only that as well. We're talking about vulnerable people again who possibly some of them don't have the capacity to understand about their money. And, you know, they do have people who have either guardianship or power of attorney who actually manage their money. And try and make this.
And of course, it's easier for them to make the transition on behalf of that young person as well.
Correct. Yeah, but at the same token, that young person up until this announcement would still have to go through a certain criteria of assessment. And the Scottish Government said as long ago as 4 years ago that there should be no external assessments for anyone that are on Scottish security benefits.
Well, they shouldn't be needed unless something drastically has changed anyway.
But I mean, people who have got a long-term, lifelong disability. The chances are that it's not going to change anytime soon.
It might get worse rather than better.
Yeah, it may do. But, again, in the round, I mean, obviously, this is a fantastic story that shows our government in complete contrast to the UK government's attitude towards young people and their disabilities. And this comes at a time when again, you've got to remember that for the last couple of years, the SNP have been decried for not using the full extent of the powers that they've got, and this is them now coming into it, which is in line with the timescale that the Scottish Government said that everything would be done.
What I think is interesting about this, Chris, is I think many people are unaware of the fact that the Scottish Government is being given an entire power. This is not just a percentage of it. We're getting power over all disability benefits.
Correct.
So that means potentially hundreds of thousands or even millions of people will benefit from this move from taking back control from Westminster.
Yeah, and if people can actually see the great strides that the Scottish Government have taken towards their attitude of forming a new social security system for Scotland, one that has dignity, fairness and respect at its heart, and you're not having people phoning you up trying to diddle you out of money.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Agreed,
I mean, I am one of the benefactors of it because I get paid an extra £400 to look after my older brother,
which
compared to a carer in England or Wales. So I appreciate that.
You're actually being funded better through the Scottish Government than your counterparts in England.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris, we're going to leave this subject now, moving on to our next story. This is concerning the decision of the Turkish government to basically allow people to cross its borders. Now, the first victim of the worsening crisis that has engulfed Greece following Turkey's abrupt decision to open its borders to thousands of refugees who are desperate to reach Europe has been confirmed with the death of a child in the waters off Lesbos. Authorities said that the 4-year-old Syrian boy died early today when an inflatable dinghy carrying people from the Turkish coast capsized off the island. Doctors rushed to save the child, but it was too late, the police source on Lesbos has said. As is customary, the boat was deliberately sunk so that the people inside would be rescued and allowed to come ashore. And that, we believe, is when the tragedy happened. The death came as Greek government sources confirmed that border forces had thwarted 9,877 people from trying to cross its borders overnight. At least 1,000 people had managed to circumvent a flotilla of naval vessels and Coast Guard patrol boats to reach Greece's eastern Aegean islands since Sunday morning. Reports have been rife of people being transferred to the borders en masse by Turkish authorities in buses and military vehicles. Athens' centre-right government announced that it was ratcheting up its frontier defences to the highest possible level late last night, saying that the country was facing an asymmetric threat to its security. As of today, both the Army and the Border Patrol forces have been placed on maximum alert, with the military engaging in exercises using live ammunition, along with the Evros land frontier abutting Turkey and as far as Lesbos, according to the Defence Ministry. The exercises were interpreted as a covert effort to deter people from making the journey to Greece. Now, Chris, this is a complicated story because the people who are struggling to get to Greece at the moment through Turkey are fleeing from the Syrian conflict, which is, of course, right up against the Turkish southern border. And so they're fleeing across into Turkey. The Turkish government claims that particularly the European Union is not giving enough assistance to them. They already have 4.5 million, I believe, Syrian refugees whom they are looking after. And this would appear to be Turkey's desperate attempt to basically get the attention of the international community by just opening its borders.
Well, I mean, Turkey have threatened just to open the borders and
just say,
turn
we
a
can't
blind eye.
hold them back anymore.
You know, I mean, this is one case where the EU are not exactly covering themselves in glory.
No,
but then that, you know, as member states are actually struggling because of people fleeing from a land that has been bombarded, dare I say, peppered daily by two other governments who are not allowing the dialogue to even begin in order to try and stop any other action escalating any further, which is causing more people in order to flee the violence that's happening.
The Syrian war, it seems to be in its latter stages now, with most of the anti-government forces still in Syria now congregated around Idlib. And of course the pro-Assad government forces, who are reinforced by Russian air support, are trying to clear the last vestiges of these rebels out. And of course, hundreds of thousands of people are fleeing this area. Idlib is a sizable town. Tens of thousands have taken to their heels, basically, and fled over the border. So I think the Turkish Turkish government must have been very desperate to take such an action as this.
Well,
you also feel some sympathy for them.
Because they feel that that they are not being listened to, and this is a direct ultimatum that was delivered last week. That the fact that they would just open the borders and turn a blind eye.
If something wasn't done to help.
But they possibly still could do. And then that would leave the internal EU countries having to deal with a swell of an influx of refugees, which predominantly, as history has taught us, is the fact that they don't just leave one border and stay in another.
No, they'll go somewhere else and
they
try
will
and
go
cross
somewhere else. And again, we will see the fact that the burgeoning coastline of the EU will be at breaking point again. And I use the word breaking point, and I deliberately use that word because, as you know, I've done an awful lot of refugee work in Cali, and that they will go to the point of basically no return.
Do you not think, Chris, that the war in Syria, I know it's a civil war, technically speaking, it's a civil war. However, it's also a proxy war between Russia, America, even and now Ankara as well, because the Turkish government is now having to defend its southern flank. And it's now placing its own soldiers into places like Idlib to try to clear away any other potential threats to their borders. So it's a very complicated situation. The European Union, which seems to be completely gutless, if you want to use the phrase, and the UN completely gutless in actually doing anything
Yeah,
about this.
You'd
think the UNHCR would be right in there helping these refugees right now.
But this is the thing that I can't understand is that that there is a steady influx even now to the coastline regions of France. And we're not just talking about Calais and stuff like that.
It's everywhere.
We are talking about everywhere.
Okay.
And the numbers are not going down.
And of course,
and in fact, they're actually increasing. But what is now happening, because they are fighting, for want of a better word, an internal battle, and I'm talking about the French government, right, at this moment in time, and the Belgian government as well. Italy is exactly the same.
They're looking the other way, aren't they?
They're looking the other way, and they're putting sticking plasters on the problem by what they are doing is that they are dispelling the camps where the migrants are converging. And they are then dispersing them into a wider area where you've now got migrants that are actually sleeping under the flyovers of the motorways.
They create a new underclass of people.
And this is happening in France, it's happening in Belgium, right the way through to Germany as well.
Much as I agree with you, Chris, I'm afraid we'll have to move on from this story. Our next story is moving across the Atlantic to America now, and this is the tale of Pete Buttigieg, who has dropped out of the 2020 Democratic presidential race. Following disappointing results in Saturday's South Carolina primary contest, billionaire Tom Steyer and the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg, have both dropped out of the race to be the Democratic nominee to face Donald Trump in November's general election. Steyer had been relying on a strong performance in South Carolina to give him momentum to carry on in the race, while Buttigieg needed a good enough performance in the heavily African-American state to overcome criticisms of his ability to reach non-white voters. Steyer ended up with 11% of the vote, while Buttigieg managed just 8%. Following similarly disappointing results in Nevada, neither felt able to continue. The results mean that the youngest man in the race is now Joe Biden at 77 years old. He's the youngest man in the race. Amy Klobuchar at 59 and Tulsi Gabbard at 38 are still officially in the race, but with no credible path to victory. Bernie Sanders and multi-billionaire Michael Bloomberg are both 78 and Elizabeth Warren is 70. Donald Trump is 73. It means that whomever is president following the election will almost certainly be the oldest ever upon their inauguration. Buttigieg, the first openly gay person ever to run for president, ended his campaign telling his supporters that he felt that he had to stand aside in the name of unity and bringing the party and the country together. However, CNN reported that the former mayor was unwilling to be the reason that Sanders, the current national frontrunner, is able to get an insurmountable delegate lead on Super Tuesday. Joe Biden's South Carolina strategy appears to have paid off, though. Following an extremely disappointing results in the first three state contests, Biden won a decisive victory in South Carolina with almost 50% of the vote. This is his first state win in three different presidential campaigns. Sanders came a distant second with 19%, and this leaves the two very close in total delegate numbers going into Super Tuesday tomorrow, when 14 states and territories will vote. These include Texas and California, which each dwarf the total number of delegates awarded to the first four states combined. Now, Chris, I don't know how much we pay attention to what goes on in the United States, but this appears to suggest that Buttigieg has jumped out of the way in order that Bernie Sanders does not get enough support to be the nominee to face Trump. Now, is this the way you would read it?
I would read this thing exactly that way. But interestingly enough, I was talking to your counterpart Kenny McBride about this, and he was telling me that the rise of socialist policies within the Californian and Texan states
Yeah.
is actually on the rise,
So-
which is really quite surprising to me.
Is this among the populists generally, or is this only among
I
Democratic
think it was.
voters?
I think Kenny was suggesting that it was within the Democratic voters. But what was surprising to me, moreover, was the fact that I've always viewed people, just say for argument's sake,
Well, I mean, as a
San
socialist, you
Francisco.
must take an interest in this.
Yeah. Well, the people of the state of California had a centre-right mayor for years and years and years. One of my own personal acting idols, Clint Eastwood.
Okay.
And, you know, he hated socialism with a vengeance. And this seems to be turning on its head now. You know, which is welcoming to hear.
It's a
But
strange thing,
It
though.
also feeds into the narrative that socialism doesn't really sit well in the shoulders of the American electorate.
I think the American electors historically have always confused socialism with communism.
Yes,
And
that's
they
correct.
seem to think that the two are the same. We know obviously that they're
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
But maybe it's now beginning to dawn on some, say, better educated American citizens that socialism is not the bogeyman that they
Well,
once
it's certainly not the bogeyman
thought
of,
it might be.
you know, it's certainly not the bogeyman of 1920s, 30s, 40s
But-
Stalinist Russia.
My
You know,
question would be, Chris, though, if that is the case, and these states are huge in terms of population, is that going to give Bernie Sanders a boost, do you believe? I mean, is this just a trend, or is this something just,
well,
is it real?
I would really hope so, because what we have to remember is that the four major powerhouses throughout the world at this moment in time are all centre-right, excluding China, of course. They are all centre-right government. You know, who vehemently hate socialism in any shape or form. You know, I mean, obviously, as a self-confessed socialist, you know, I would like to embrace socialism. It depends on who's actually delivering it.
Yep.
Now, quite clearly, if you look at the UK perspective, people were, you know, quite enthused with the socialist charter that was being offered by the Corbyn
Of course,
government,
this is
but
an
they
echo.
didn't like Corbyn.
But this is an echo of the situation with Corbyn, where perhaps the Democrats, who are pretty much the Labour Party of America, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
Do not seem to want Bernie Sanders to lead them more
Yeah.
to the left.
Yeah, but again, you know, it's...
The Democrats are worried about being too radical.
Yeah, they are worried about being
Which,
too
considering
radical.
the president that they're facing, is a remarkable.
Yeah, but I think, you know, and this is
Mistake,
something.
maybe?
This is something that, you know, frightens an awful lot of people when we're discussing centre-right politics and socialism. Is the fact that because the country is constantly been on a track
Yeah.
of, should I say, a tradition of capitalism, they fear a complete capitulation to the opposite.
Chris?
Would possibly see the economy get into a kind of like a free fall. Do you know what I mean?
Fair enough. Okay, Chris, I'm going to leave this story. We are running out of time, so we're going to hopefully rush through this story before we end the show today.
It's your fault. You started talking about socialism.
Okay, this is about your other favourite thing. This is about alcohol, Chris. Okay, new analysis released this week shows the number of alcohol-related emergency hospital admissions has fallen by almost 6,500 under the SNP. Latest figures from the Scottish Parliament's Information Centre point to a 16% drop in emergency hospital admissions since 2007, with the number of emergency admissions to psychiatric units also dropping by a third during the same period. Last month, the research from the NHS found that the volume of pure alcohol sold per person had dropped in Scotland since the introduction of minimum unit pricing, when it increased in England and Wales over the same period. Data presented to the British Association for the Study of the Liver suggests that alcohol-related deaths in Glasgow have fallen by over a fifth since the policy was introduced in 2018. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the responses by the government to this.
Yeah.
It is obviously good news, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's
It's a policy that works.
Yeah, it's definitely a news story that you're not going to hear on the BBC because it is actually an SNP good story. It's where the government have taken a stance, you know, using the minimum pricing index in order to tackle, the alcohol addiction records and the
tackled the root
social,
cause.
but also the social effects
Yes.
that impinges in. So, definitely a welcome. Good news SNP story.
Well, Chris, listen, we've run out of time, unfortunately. We had a lot to cram in tonight. Again, thank you very much for your input, as usual.
No, thank
Always
you very much,
interesting,
Gordon.
Chris, when
Thank
you're
you.
in the studio. It just remains for me to wish everybody a good night. And before we do that, if you wish to become a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland, you can do so by following the instructions on your screen there now. That's it from us at Scotland at 7 tonight. So from everyone here in the studio, a very good night to you.